Welcome to Grannie's GodPod number 14, looking at the validity of biblical texts. Early texts were not complete Bibles. They were written in scroll form. Scrolls were very expensive to produce if you had to pay a professional scribe to copy one, and the materials, parchment or vellum from animal skins, were also expensive to produce. Papyrus was less durable, but cheaper and less of a loss if burned through persecution. The Bible initiated a codex style of manuscript, written on both sides of papyrus and bound like a book. With the stability that came from the end of Roman persecution in 313 AD, vellum was preferred. One of the earliest texts is P46, Papyrus 46, dated about 175 to 200 AD. It originally contained Romans, Hebrews, 1 and 2 Corinthians, Ephesians, Galatians, Philippians, Colossians, and 1 and 2 Thessalonians, on about 104 leaves, of which 86 still exist. P66 has much of John's Gospel and is also dated to 175 to 200 AD. P75, dating to the early 3rd century, has sections of John and Luke. Papyrus 72 is the earliest manuscript of Peter's epistles, plus Jude and other non-canonical works. The Hebrew language changed over time and had dots added later to clarify the text. Until the 9th century, New Testament manuscripts were originally unsealed texts, that is, written all in capitals without punctuation or spaces. Translation was not a simple task, but in the early 5th century, Jerome produced a translation of the Bible based not on the Greek Septuagint, but on the Hebrew of the Old Testament. It was known as the Latin Vulgate. Jerome was one of a few Christians who could read both Greek and Hebrew. Codex Sinaiticus contains most of the Old Testament and New Testament in Greek. It was discovered at St. Catherine's Monastery on Mount Sinai in 1859, when it was already 1500 years old. Codex Vaticanus is another 4th century text found in the Vatican. Both are unsealed codices that are Alexandrian in text type, of which more later. It was not until the middle of the 15th century that the printing press was introduced. Just imagine what it would be like to get hold of a copy of your favourite book if it had to be written out by hand. In the early 15th and 16th centuries, there was a move towards the source rather than other men's opinions. In the 15th century, Lorenzo Valla studied Jerome's texts and commentaries and found differences attributed to the fact that the texts were copied much more than the commentaries were. He produced a corrected copy which was closer to Jerome's original than what was being used then in the Roman Church, but he kept it quiet because such work was deemed heretical. At that time it was thought suspicious to learn Greek and downright heretical to learn Hebrew. In 1516, Desiderius Erasmus found Valla's work and published a Greek text and a fresh Latin translation. He attached annotations giving notes on various passages and scriptural themes, as well as explaining and defending his reasoning. As Jerome took the heat for translating the Vulgate, Erasmus took the heat for publishing the New Instrument. But over time, Erasmus' work in the form of the Textus Receptus became enshrined in tradition. Even so, we now know the Textus Receptus is not identical to the majority text, the differences being mostly because the Textus Receptus follows one stream of the Byzantine text type, while modern texts make use of all text types: Alexandrian, Western, Caesarean and Byzantine. The majority text is that found in the majority of Greek manuscripts, which is most often the Byzantine textual reading. There are two disputes in translation: textual disputes over what was originally written by the prophets and apostles, and translation disputes over how to translate what was originally written by the prophets and apostles. We mostly know exactly what is in the original, but differ over what is the most accurate translation. We cannot translate word for word between any language, otherwise we would not understand idiomatic sayings. This leads to formal or literal equivalency and dynamic or meaning equivalency. Early manuscripts have copyist mistakes, textual variants, due to human fallibility and difficult working conditions. Later copies may also have hearing mistakes, as copies were made in a scriptorium, where one person would read from the original document and other scribes would copy down what was said. Harmonization is another kind of error, when a phrase with which you are very familiar occurs slightly differently, and the copyist automatically inserts the familiar phrase. There are thousands of variants in the Bible manuscripts, but not the same variant in the same place. So it is easy to identify these scribal errors just because we have multiple copies. James White, the author of The King James Only Controversy, says no textual variants in either Old or New Testaments in any way, shape or form materially disrupt or destroy any essential doctrine of Christian faith. Because the New Testament books were written at various times and were quickly copied and distributed as soon as they were written, there was no time when any one or any group could gather up all the manuscripts and make extensive changes to the text or doctrines. P66 and P76 were buried in the sands of Egypt for a millennium, and when discovered were nearly identical to those used in the meantime, which shows there had not been any deliberate corruption of the text. Thanks for listening. See you next time. Don't forget to subscribe. Bye now.